And here we go.
And before we can predict the opening, before Kai can get it right again, it's 1e4. And Wesley, he's not going to back down from his normal repertoire. His standard repertoire, his default setting is rock solid anyway. And I expect to see maybe the Berlin defense, if given the opportunity, one of the hardest nuts to crack in terms of chess openings. What will Mamedov go for now? It's strange to pause on move 3, I've got to say. Either you bring your bishop out, which is what nearly all top players do nowadays, or you have maybe a sideline up your sleeve. But you've got to surprise Wesley. You've got to do it now. And
there are some adventurous lines in the Scotch. The problem is Wesley plays the Scotch opening from the white side, so you're not going to catch him off guard there. We get the Italian. A slower start, but maybe there will be some tricks up Rauf Mamedov's sleeve.
Yeah, at least with the Italian game, we do often see all of the pieces still on the board at move 15, move 20, and even beyond that. So going for maximum tension here, Rauf Mamedov. And it is one of the main lines of the Italian game. It will just slow down, I expect, go to a maneuvering phase. Tanya, who do you think this is going to favour?
I completely understand the decision to go for the Italian. The Spanish would be a bad idea because it would allow the Berlin, as you mentioned. Scotch, not a great opening against Wesley. With the Italian, the reason that Rauf is taking time in the opening is that you have to kind of decide your own setup, how you want to place your pieces. It's all about the little pawn moves. Do you commit c3? Do you go short castle? Do you first bring out your knight to d2? What do you do with the a pawn? And all that will determine the kind of middle game that Rauf will get. All he wants to do is to make sure that he has flexibility. That is why he's chosen the move c3, always eyeing that center break on d4. He wants to first, of course, finish his development. And I'm expecting a developing move right now, bringing out the knight or going short castle. I like this approach by Rauf in a win-on-demand situation.
Yep. The Italian game, it wasn't in fashion up until maybe the mid-2010s, and suddenly everyone was playing it. Suddenly everyone was beating me with it. And yeah, it tends to be a good opening in these must-win types of situations. However, of course, Wesley so vastly experienced both with white and with black in this opening. And Mamedov doesn't look like he's enjoying it on the camera, I've got to say. Doesn't look too optimistic about his chances. He still played very logical moves. Black now castling. White is super flexible. You can castle yourself. You can delay that if you want to maybe maneuver your pieces a bit further. But either way, he's got to believe in his chances in this game. Otherwise, he won't get a look in.
One of the most unpleasant things in the chess world is to play for a win against an opponent like Wesley So. He's just so hard to beat, so well prepared. Give him one opportunity, he takes it and doesn't give you a chance. He keeps everything under control. And I like that white hasn't committed a short castle move. So now Rauf is really thinking, does he want to try to create something on the king side now that black has gone short castle himself? Or will he play a slower Italian with the ideas, the thematic ideas of transferring the knight to the king side to g3?
Yeah. And that's one idea. There's a bunch of options you can go for, while Rauf has another slightly confusing long think here. This is the one that you're recommending here, Tanya. It can happen now or on the next moves. For example, if you wait, you can wait maybe by dropping your bishop back or by pushing a pawn. You could also try and tempt black to play a useful looking move, such as this one, just stopping any later bishop pin along this diagonal. But now suddenly white could use this pawn as a hook and perhaps try to start attacking. And look at what Rauf has done. He's hoping for a slip like this from Wesley. Of course, it won't happen. Wesley's too experienced. He knows all of the ins and outs of all of these plans for both sides. But Rauf drops his bishop back, saying, OK, you commit first. You show me your hand, you show me your plan, and then I'll decide where to put my pieces. If you push this pawn forward, I might well start blasting open the king side and try to castle with my king on the opposite flank later. If you don't commit to that move, at least I'll know what setup you're going for, what you intend to do. So interesting kind of mind games here, and those are the questions that Rauf especially is asking himself right now.
And Wesley is deliberating here because he has many attractive moves. He could just bring his light square bishop out to e6, offer a trade of pieces. He does just that as soon as I mentioned. He could have first slid his rook over to protect that square, but he decides, let's go for the trade. If white has just spent a turn going bishop back to b3, now bishop takes e6, it seems like you're a tempo down from the white side, so there's no fear for black opening up that f-file. Instead, Rauf castles, but I just don't feel this is the type of position he wanted. He's in must-win territory, and I truly believe that Wesley So may be the single worst opponent to play when you need to win. Magnus Carlsen needed to beat him in classical chess in Vaikunze. He hit Magnus of the white pieces, couldn't do it. Wesley was super solid, so I just think that Wesley, he's too precise, and he does not play with any risk.
Yeah, and this position looks like a dream for black if we talk about openings and their outcomes. Now you can just drop your bishop back. This bishop is attacked, and at some point later you can aim to break forward in the center. It feels like black has equalized effortlessly. Light squared bishops have left the board, and every piece trade will guide Wesley towards safety, at least for black. And yeah, I think it's not, unfortunately, been the most successful of Italian games for Rauf, but can he keep the tension? Can he keep the winning chances? I don't think I want to face Wesley in a must-win situation. I definitely don't want to face him in this position either, because it looks right up his alley. It looks like he's well in his comfort zone.
And once that bishop falls back, Wesley's already threatening to advance the A pawn to attack the white knight on b3. So white will again have to spend another tempo stopping that idea, because if black is able to advance further on the queen side, then you get more space with the pawn jumping forward. So once I think bishop to b6 happens, white will have to make the move a4, giving black the opportunity to make that central break that we've been talking about with d5.
Yeah, and it's surprising neither side took time out to go for either of those plans. Instead, Wesley just takes time now to cover this square for the white bishop. You don't allow any pin, you don't allow any uncomfortable tension there. Of course, white can't propel his pawns forward and go to try and open lines against this hook, because white's king has finally committed to the king side, and he's arguing that a knight takes bishop type of move will actually favor black, because suddenly a semi-open file, a backward pawn to target, if the black rooks can line up against it, it might well just drop off the board later. Interesting decision, and just safety first approach again from Wesley. So classy, just preventing any glimpse, any hint of activity for white's bishop.
And we see the pieces swapped off, though. I think that gives at least Rauf something to consider, that in the long term he has the bishop against a knight. The pawn on c5, not really a weakness. I actually consider it a strength, because white will never be able to push that d3 pawn up to d4. So what black will likely do is just double or triple along the d file, bring the rooks to the party, and start putting pressure on that square. So I don't think that immediately white has any progress, at least not easy to make. But down the road, if white also doubles the rooks behind that pawn, maybe there are some eventual breaks, maneuvering of the pieces that can give Rauf some hope. So it's not an advantage, certainly not, but it's at least something to hope for.
Yeah, it's some imbalance, and that's the most you can hope for when you're trying to win a game. You just change the type of pieces you have, change the pawn structure slightly, and hope that long-term that pays off. But yeah, for now, it's very much a slow maneuvering game while these players try to figure out their strategies. And first of all, Wesley has to defend that pawn on c5. Probably with a pawn, maybe with this queen.
Oh.
But
Wow.
Robert, what a move.
What a move. I love it. He's just breaking open the center, targeting that d3 pawn, and says, come and take my c4 pawn. Not only do you double up your own pawns, but watch out for that pawn in the center. Notice how the e4 pawn gets weak, and black will be able to snap that up with his own knight. I love this move. It solves the problem of having the double pawns for black, and now the ball's in white's court, and not pleasant choices to be made here for white.
Yeah, it's a dilemma already for Rauf. Either you capture this pawn, as we were pointing out there, and black now has a 4 versus 3 majority on the king side in terms of pawns. Meanwhile, white's double pawns don't make a great impression here. Or the sad alternative would be, well, what is the alternative?
It's hard to come up with a move.
Maybe to drop the knight back, allowing a symmetrical pawn structure. You have an issue of this pawn. I guess you could defend it and then pick up this pawn next for white, but very maximum here. You just get symmetrical pawn structure and dead equality. And that's being optimistic, I've got to say.
That's what happens when you make one careless move against a superstar like Wesley So. The move bishop e3, such a natural developing move, attacking the pawn that was on c5. It seems at first he should have brought his queen up to the e2 square. That way c4 isn't a threat. Then developed his bishop, then connected his rooks, and that would have given him much more to play for. But look at Wesley. He does not even pause for a second. He swaps the queens off, and all he needs is the draw. He might even be decided for choice in this endgame with the healthier pawn structure. It's going to be a 4-on-3 majority on the king side if we cut the board in half. And for white, that 4-on-3 majority, you got double pawns. You're not going to be able to create a pass pawn. This is just great for Wesley So.
Yeah, I just love how he instantly hoovers off the queens. I think most of us would be reluctant to give away and cede the d file, but he doesn't care. He knows that the rook can infiltrate. It's just one move, and soon the rook will be evicted from the black half. Just really calm, eliminating all the pieces, eliminating all the danger. Just classic Wesley So.
This is amazing stuff. I mean, this queen trade, he doesn't want to give any chance to his opponent. The reason he decided to take on d1 and then on e4 is that if you capture the pawn on e4, if you just back up one move and take on e4 instead, it allows this sliver of hope for white with the move queen d5, centralizing the queen, putting pressure on black, and if you take that queen, well, it's a pawn structure that you will suffer in the endgame. But Wesley doesn't want to go through any of that, trades the queens, just again, very clinical play when he needs a draw.
Yeah, very clinical play, and we see here Rauf Mamedov just shuffle his rook to the side. It's looking very, very good, very solid for Wesley, and a bunch of moves here. You can kind of protect your pawn, your knight indirectly. You can just jump back with the knight if you're scared of it being attacked in the next few moves. You could even, if you're feeling ambitious, push this pawn forward. I'm not sure how much risk Wesley So will take now, but yeah, it does feel like he's a big favourite to make the draw he needs.
And I do see some questions in the awesome Twitch chat. If you are watching on the chess.com channel on Twitch, some people asking if this is the last game of today. And it is. If Wesley So wins this game or it is a draw, then this is actually the last game of today. But the action continues tomorrow with winners, semifinals, and losers, round 1. And Rauf Mamedov, he did lose game 3 to Wesley So. And he was very upset afterwards. Look at that.
And this was his chance. This game was his chance.
Yeah, because he had winning chances as well in this game.
Yeah, it's more than just winning chances. It's he knows he had it in the bag, and it's so hard to recover. It's not just affecting that one game that he lost, it's affecting this game. And you can see on his body language he's not feeling too happy with himself.
Because if he were able to at least draw in game 3, he would have the white pieces here in game 4. That would send it potentially to Armageddon. And people can't forget that in the Chess.com Global Championship, Neil Sarin made to the final when he lost and became runner-up to Wesley So. But he almost lost in round 1 to Rauf Mamedov. This is not someone who just appeared on the scene. This is somebody who's been around the block. He's Wreckham Rauf, and he knows that if he's playing his best chess, he can take down Wesley So in a match. So that is why he was so upset. He had his chance. He was outplaying Wesley. In fact, throughout the match, I don't think he's really been worse, except for that one endgame that David was highlighting where the H-pawn started to run.
Yeah. Very close.
And it's always more heartbreaking when you know you were on the brink of victory. If you get outclassed, if you get outplayed, then you kind of just accept it. And that can happen against someone as strong as Wesley So. But he's had his opportunity, massive opportunity, and now he's got to do it all over again. Yeah. And, OK, he's played some decent moves. I quite like what White has done in terms of pawn structure on the king side. He's pushed his G-pawn forward. Normally, a dark square bishop is well complemented by pawns on light squares, but still an uphill struggle to create weaknesses. Black's very solid. And, oh, a trade of rooks. Interesting decision. Giving away the d-file this time. And it's all to push his pawn forward. Talked about wrecking Rauf. He's trying to wreck the pawn structure. Sorry.
Getting the feeling that Rauf is over-pushing right now. It almost feels like he's going a little bit on tilt here. And not taking that much time, making all these very strong, rash decisions of pushing the pawn, trading the rooks on the d-file. I think when we saw him that upset on the screen, it's also because for the players who are making that debut in the Champions Chess Tour, it's really an opportunity that they've never had before. And they've been able to do that this time because of the new format, which allows grandmasters to qualify and play in the tour. So it definitely means a lot. And to have that winning opportunity against a player like Wesley, it can be really frustrating because you know if you have to win on demand against him, just how hard it will be. Right now, we're seeing by Rauf, these moves, advancing the pawn, g4, g5. To me, it seems more on tilt and more rash than an actual try for a win.
Yeah, it feels like minimum reward, but quite a lot of risk involved. But then again, a draw is the same as a loss for him. So he's just trying to confuse Wesley, create some chances. You can't just sit there and beat Wesley with a very stable pawn structure. Instead, he's at least trying to change, again, the dynamics of the position, imbalance things slightly. And maybe we can jump in, because Wesley has paused. I thought his move was automatic. I wouldn't actually consider anything else here for Black other than capturing this G-pawn, this straggler in the Black camp. But what else could he be thinking about? Rauf's idea, we should mention, after pawn takes pawn, is to recapture with the bishop. And again, a bit of an annoying pin, but mostly it's all about pressure on this e5 pawn. And Wesley, what else could he be considering here? Why has he stopped for the last couple of minutes?
I think it's exactly that. He is trying to calculate a little bit ahead to see how he wants to actually respond to that attack on the e5 pawn. It's not very pleasant to actually sidestep with your rook to the closed file, the closed e file, to defend your own pawn, and then allow white's rook to step forward. So not wanting that, he decides to take another decision. David, he doesn't want to allow white to put pressure on the e file. He falls back with the knight on h7. That's slightly surprising to me.
I'm trying to figure out what's the idea. Is this not a pawn sacrifice by Wesley? So after pawn takes pawn, this pawn's defended by his bishop.
He answers your question.
We're all looking confused. Okay, Robert.
I think I understand it. So even though objectively it seems it was a mistake, if we just go back, if he had indeed captured on g5, and that rook e8 was the follow-up after bishop takes pawn, and after bishop takes f6, g takes f6. We see the evaluation bar. If you get to this position on the board, it says, it's level, not a big deal. But there is this outside pass pawn, this h pawn that black needs to stop. So insert endgames with pieces getting traded, white may just be winning. So what Wesley is likely relying on, and what he did in the game, is he sacrificed the pawn, but said, that pawn, I'm likely going to be able to corral it and win it later, so let me just keep the remaining pawn structure healthy for black and then proceed from there. I think that it was a mistake. The other line did not look particularly scary, but at least I understand what Wesley was thinking in doing this, and he may just try to create a fortress, push his pawn up to f6, bring his king out to f7, and maybe when the time is right, he can start pushing his pawns on the king side and say that white is stuck in his tracks, no more progress to be had.
Something like this, and as you say, Robert, maybe bring the knight round. Eventually, this pawn, you can go for it with your king, with your rook, maybe. It's not going anywhere for now, and black is still super solid, but being a pawn down, you want to avoid it if you can in an endgame. Very surprising. We said that Wesley, he's so solid, but yeah, here he's making a bit of a risky decision, and the evaluation bar does react. I'm not sure whether it's just because white is a pawn up, so the evaluation bar says, okay, slightly better for white right now, but wow, what a move by Rauf Mamedov. He's going for it on the other flank as well. This could be potentially very strong and a bit of a shock to Wesley. He's played b4, and this pawn is covered twice, this square, by black's pieces. For example, after a recapture, black can even take with his knight. But suddenly, white has very aggressive moves. Firstly, knight takes pawn is an idea. The rook could also swing across. I'm not sure which one is stronger out of those two. But Rauf, he's trying to give up a pawn to get a pawn back. And the more lines that become open, the more that will favor white's bishop and rook. So Wesley wants none of that. He just simply sets up that solid pawn wall in the center. And Rauf, I think he's going to start stepping forward. Why not? This is where he has the majority. 4 versus 3. It's going to be hard to create a pass pawn here, but at least he's kicking away the black pieces. Interesting stuff.
This is fantastic play by Rauf to try to create his chances. And after f6, he has the option to actually slide with his rook already to the b file. Now that the e pawn is supported, you defend your own pawn, and you want to try to push your pawns and gain space on the queen side. And with that h pawn still alive, it looks like all the risk that he was going for has paid off.
Yeah. I like it. I'm starting to like it a lot for white. This pawn does tie down a whole knight after all. And, OK, he's just solidified his pawn structure with his own pawn. Looks like a bit of a kind of hesitant move, a bit of an indecisive move. But at least he has enough imbalance now to have a chance of winning this game.
What do you think right now, Robert? Chances we will see Armageddon on this very first day of the Champions Chess Tour 2023?
Pretty good chances. I think that this decision was one that Wesley might kick himself for. I understand it. I can get behind it to some extent because he thinks he has a fortress, an impenetrable setup. He may be down one pawn, but good luck to getting to any of the others. But as we've been highlighting, there are issues on the queen side. White does have an extra pawn on that side of the board, and black isn't just going to win this pawn on h6. That's a passer that's going to remain, at the very least, tied down some of black's forces to it. So I do think that this game will go on for quite a while, and that's good news for Rauf and his winning chances.
Yeah, it's almost as if Wesley was in a must-win situation, taking that decision, giving up a pawn. Very, very strange stuff. And, OK, he's pushed his pawn to g5, so cutting the coordination between white's bishop and that pass pawn on h6. Black has a clear plan now. He's simply going to advance the black king towards that lone pawn on h6. But, again, white has 2 moves. White has at least 2 moves, maybe, while that plan happens. How can he best take advantage of the time that Wesley's given him? I'm still looking for ways to push on the queen side. It looked like Rauf was reluctant to do that on the last few moves. White's knight, white's bishop, a bit stuck. They need to improve. Tanya, do you see any plans here for white? I'm trying to work out if there's any way forward, any concrete moves here for
Oh,
Rauf.
one thing's for sure, right? You've got to try and keep that 8-6 pawn alive for as long as you can. And the one thing that white needs to do to make that happen is to push the other h pawn. Once you go h4, you break this g5 pawn, which is stopping the connection between the bishop on e3 and the pawn on h6. So it can really stay on the board for a long time, distracting black's pieces. And once that happens, you can try to expand on the queen side. I like the idea, and I like the move b5, kicking that black knight away, and then advancing the c pawn further down the board, creating a second weakness on the queen side.
Yeah, a second avenue for attack potentially. I'm also looking at white's knight. In this variation you mentioned, after it pushes forward, the black pawn will attack it anyway. So I'm not sure whether we flick in this move and then perhaps go here to attack this black pawn, or perhaps go towards the center. But ideally, we want to land the knight in this, on this beautiful post on e4, but it might get stopped by black's pawn advance. So I'm wondering, do you go for it now in the current position? Here, at least it feels looser for black to push this pawn forward to prevent white's knight getting in. It could start hopping around some really sweet, juicy squares, and he does go for this very natural move. That knight was not doing too much, and okay, he first flicks in h4 and g4, so he has opened up, once again, the protection of this pawn. Interesting stuff. I'm starting to like his chances a lot.
It's getting double-edged, but that's what you need if you're playing for a win. All of a sudden, black is pushing those pawns forward. The f-pawn may go up the board as well. And don't be surprised if black starts creating threats. That rook can slam down in the d3 square at some moment. So white needs to act without caution. I mean, you need to play quickly, because if you just start making slow moves, like bring your king to the side to f1, things of that nature, it seems like black will be the first to attack. The pawn h6, protected. It's safe for now, but it's not doing anything. It's blockaded. So I think that black is ready to strike.
Yeah, black is ready to strike, and Wesley, I think both sides just need to play quickly now. They both need to throw caution to the wind and just go for it. Wesley can't just think of locking this down with a fortress. That doesn't exist anymore. Long term, white is still doing extremely well. So he needs to push pawns, maybe land that black rook in the heart of white's camp. And Rauf there shaking his head, kind of looking up. It's as if he's still dwelling in the past. He's still remembering that missed opportunity in Game 3. He needs to focus now, because he's played very well. He's created chances out of nothing, seemingly. And it's actually Wesley who needs to come up with answers in this exact moment.
And that's one of the hardest things to do as a chess player, is to forget what has just happened, especially when you know that you had a big opportunity and you let that slip. To forget that, to leave that behind and focus on what's in front of you is definitely a big challenge. And in this format, it doesn't get any easier. So we see a decision to trade on b4. The big question to my mind here is, Robert, David, what is white's idea if black does go f5? I want to trap that bishop on e3. I want to go f4. Your knight on d2 is hanging. How are you responding to f5?
Yeah, Wesley hasn't gone for it yet. He's holding back. It feels as if he's still trying to play with the break on. But you're right, Tanya. This is on tap anytime you want it. For example, if white does mess around with a seemingly kind of useful move, but not doing too much, then this is definitely going to be one idea for black. The knight suddenly has to move just to create some squares for the bishop, perhaps, to retreat. But this is really kind of not what you want to see. You don't want to start pushing pieces back. So instead, Rauf continues with the plan he initiated a couple of moves ago, landing his knight on e4, and Wesley immediately lands his own knight on this very nice square, hinting at simply grabbing pawns back.
We see the issue with what Rauf did. He brought his knight to d2. He centralized his knight. How could you possibly complain about that decision? But when black played the move pawn g5 to g4, David, your instinct, I think, was correct to drop the knight towards the rim to attack that pawn and induce the pawn up to f5. Because if that black pawn were already on f5, the knight couldn't hop there. What's that knight doing? It's attacking not just the bishop on e3, but the pawn on h4 and the pawn on h6, all at the same time. Black can bring the king up to f7 as well. The rook can still go up to d3. White is up a pawn, but it's doubled pawns on the c file, not making progress just yet. I think Wesley makes it look easy sometimes. He made probably an objective mistake by giving up a pawn, but practically speaking, it's looked like he's had no issues since then.
Yeah, if we think about simple positions or endgames or certain positions where there are simple plans, Wesley, I think he's #1 in the world. Maybe with Magnus Carlsen up there too. It's just he makes it look so straightforward, as if, how did you not see this earlier? How did you not understand this plan? He's so consistent once he finds an idea, and he's going for it now. It's very hard to hold everything together for white.
I don't see how white is actually hold on to that extra pawn. You're threatening to take on h4. You're threatening to land that knight on f3 with a devastating check. The only way that I can see white creating any play is to take advantage of the open a file, shift that rook from the center now all the way across the board, go to a1, start targeting the 7th rank, the pawns on the 7th rank. The h4 pawn is dead and gone.
Yeah, you just have to say, bye-bye, I'm going to give you a pawn back, and you have to activate those white pieces. But 2 minutes now for Rauf, 5 for Wesley. It's not looking promising in terms of a fight back anymore. Just 1 or 2 slips, and that's all Wesley needs. Well, this is looking tough. I don't envy him in this position.
And the white king is actually wide open. There are plenty of checkmating attacks. If we go for Tanya's line, if we can just show a few moves, that would lead to a forced checkmating sequence. Let's say the rook slides to a1, the black knight takes on h4, the rook goes up to a7. Great, you're threatening those pawns. But in comes the rook to d1 with check. The king has only 1 safe square on h2 because the knight covers g2. The knight hops into f3 with check. And no matter where the king goes, up to g3 or over to g2, rook g1 is check and mate.
Wow.
So remember this configuration. With a knight on f3 defended by a pawn, once the rook slides in, it is going to be a mate against the white king. So I think that Wesley has this all under control.
Yeah, it's looking like black's pieces, they're just coordinating so well right now. It looks odd in a way because this knight is paralyzed, it's stuck, just blockading a pawn. But the rest of black's pieces, the rest of the structure is perfect. And wow, we're all reacting here in the studio because Rauf is maybe out of desperation, sacrificed a piece.
Whoa.
He's given up his knight just for a couple of pawns. And wow, okay, he's created a pin. This surely can't work.
But that's a one-move pin. You just sidestep it, defend your knight on f6, go rook to f8, and how does white continue there?
I guess there's another pawn up for grabs. This pawn can also be captured. He's just gambling here, Rauf. He knows he's in a must-win situation, and he's saying, okay, I don't care about pieces, but I guess this pawn will be taken, and the black knight steps back, defending its fellow here. It's hard to believe, I've got to say, that white has enough for the piece. But you do have 3 pawns, even if they are ugly double pawns.
And it gives you chances, because a lot of the other variations, you may not lose the game, but you're certainly not going to win. This gives Wesley some room to go wrong, and that's all you can ask for at this stage of the game. So objectively, you see the evaluation bar saying, come on, what is that? But from Rauf Mamedov, a draw equals a loss. You might as well go down swinging.
Yeah, I've got to say, the more I look at it, the more I like it. He's definitely taking chances, but that's the only way you win games at the top level. You have to take big risks. And from a human point of view, Wesley will no longer feel in control. He's suddenly on the defensive and he has to hold things together. He goes for Tanya's move, defending his knight here. But now another pawn will disappear. There we go. Another pawn drops. And suddenly, black still on the back foot. I still believe Wesley's defensive resources are more than sufficient here. But yeah, from a human point of view, a good practical decision from Rauf.
If they switch the times, then Rauf would have a legitimate chance. But unfortunately for him, it is Wesley up 3 minutes on the clock. So worst position, time management not there for you. So Wesley does have things under control. He is so strong in positions just like this.
Yep. And at least his job is easier now, Wesley, just pure defense. He's done the hard work. He's material up with this black knight. Extra black knight. But Rauf, he's going for all the pawns. This is very greedy, I've got to say. But will the greed pay off? Black's knights, once they coordinate, will actually form quite a devastating attacking threat against the white king. And actually similar patterns to the one Robert pointed out earlier might occur on the board later if white gets greedy and goes with his rook to capture that black g-pawn in the near future. First, Rauf just advancing and trying to improve to the maximum. And then he'll go pawn hunting.
They are fighting to save a spot on the winner's bracket to face Hikaru Nakamura in the winner's semifinals tomorrow. The loser will be knocked down to the loser's bracket in this double elimination format to face Gukesh in the loser's round 1 tomorrow. Now, you guys at home are fighting to win an Airthings device. Keep sharing your selfies on Twitter using the hashtag ChessChamps, preferably in landscape mode. We want to know where in the world you are following the action, where you are watching the chess, who you're watching it with, and the most creative selfie will get a signed Airthings device. Magnus Carlsen has signed some of these devices, and we will send one of them home to a lucky viewer.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the pride and joy of White's position has disappeared. That past H pawn, the front one, the H6 pawn, it's disappeared. Not only that, but another set of pieces have been traded off. So it is currently Black having a knight, White having 3 pawns in return, material equality. But the quality is not there, unfortunately. That Black knight, once it enters the game, should decide things in Black's favour.
And it's happening on the next move. You can already start bringing up the knight to e5 and putting pressure on the f2 weakness by jumping onto d3. Things are looking super bleak, and that sacrifice that we saw, the practical chance that we saw by Rauf, it was a measure of desperate times, call for desperate measures, and everything. I think the knight jump by Wesley to f5 is really what sealed the deal in this game.
Yeah, he's made some very impressive knight jumps in this one, Wesley, and I'm surprised he's hesitating. I've got to say, maybe he's just looking for the most clinical way to kill off this game. He could just jump in, improve his knights even further. He can maybe just improve the Black rook, but no, he goes for that White H pawn with his king. He's already won 1 pawn with his king. Why not go for a second H pawn? And yeah, it's holding things together now for Rauf. Maybe some drawing chances to eliminate those 2 remaining Black pawns. If you get rid of those, rook and knight versus rook is a technically drawn endgame, but at the moment it feels like a distant dream, and even a draw, remember, not enough for him to stay in this match. And Wesley locks things down on the queen side.
Locks things down, and I feel like his camera is locked down. Wesley hasn't moved since the start of the game.
He does that. He puts his hand over his head. He wants to focus on nothing but the board in front of him. And right now, he's showing why in the endgame, you can use your king as a weapon. It doesn't just need to be defended. That king is out in the open, but it's going after White's vulnerable pawn. So great performance by Wesley So in this game. He sacrificed the pawn. It looked a little shaky, but since then, it has been nothing short of a masterclass, and the advantage is only growing.
Yeah.
He could pick up the pawn.
Yeah, he could just pick up a pawn with his king right now. I don't think there's any mating ideas. That Black king is safe enough. I was going to say, I saw Wesley blink, so he's not just frozen there with the camera. He finally does change his posture, but it's too late for Rauf Mamedov. He's just trying to swap off all the pawns now, Rauf, and get a draw to salvage some pride. But Wesley is going to take this match and continue in the winner's bracket. That last Black pawn, if it survives, should ensure a win. But very minimum here as Wesley. You could just trade off everything remaining on the board. And there we go. He does want to end on a high. He does defend that Black pawn. Black's king still caged, but the Black knight now will relocate, and that will be the beginning of the end.
And for Wesley, he doesn't want to necessarily win this game. Sometimes you look at a position, you look at the evaluation bar. How could Wesley make a draw? He's completely winning. If he sees a 3-time repetition, he's taking it, because all he wants is to make it through to the winner's semifinals. He wants to play Hikaru Nakamura tomorrow. So the win in this game, it doesn't mean anything to him. Let's just secure the match.
Yeah, and we saw that from Carlsen and Nakamura, that professional approach. Both of them took draws in positions of strength in the 3rd games of their match, just to secure match victory. It's all about the next round. The end goal is to win the Airthings Masters. The end goal is not necessarily to win this game. So I think you're right, Robert. I've seen Wesley do it plenty of times before. Take the safe approach. And meanwhile, the Black rook starting to get to a more active square eventually. I don't really see any hope here for White to win this game. He's advancing with his king, maybe hinting at some checkmate attacks against the Black king. You've got to be slightly careful if the White rook steps up. There's a mate in 1 threat. If it slides across to h7, the Black king is trapped. But you do have a move, a valuable move for Wesley to break this construction. I'm expecting the Black knight to jump back, check, hit the White king, force it away, and no more cage for the Black king.
Actually, even after the check, once the White king does step forward, White is still threatening a mate on h7. So what Black wants to do with this check is give a check on d4 as well, and keep checking that White king.
Yeah, there's always a glimmer of hope as long as you've got a checkmate threat on the board. So we did see a couple of checks. The Black knight.
It's like, wait, that is not legal.
Don't fall into it now. It's still there, the threat. Of course, Wesley has spotted it, and the
repetition.
It begins. And I think Rauf can only avoid the draw now if he goes forward with the White king, but that would also be playing for a loss. He knows his chances of progressing in this match are gone. But now it's Wesley who doesn't go for the draw.
Surprise.
Robert, I was about to say you predicted the future, but no, he's just playing on.
I'm shocked, because he doesn't need to win this game. He could have just ended it with a repetition. Instead, he brings his king back, and maybe he's enjoying the fact that he has a better position, because in the 3 prior games, it was really deadlocked. And in fact, in game 3, Rauf Mamedov had the advantage. So for Wesley, perhaps it's a moment to enjoy before he goes and plays Hikaru Nakamura tomorrow.
Yep. And often on the first day of tournaments, it's nice to play a long day. I know it's tiring, but you feel fully warmed up. You feel kind of back in the zone. So Wesley's kind of pushing this. The long game here, I feel, will benefit him in days to come. And meanwhile, Rauf just keeping the pressure on, keeping an eye on that black c6 pawn. Not going to help, but he's trying.
Now Wesley's down to 24 seconds. Is he regretting not just repeating the moves and wrapping up the match?
Just get out of here, take the draw and move on. Yeah, it's surprising. What's Wesley thinking about?
14 seconds.
And only 3 seconds increment, remember.
He's
10
frozen.
seconds.
Okay, he made the move there. He does give another check. He's still on tap, that type of repetition if you kind of perpetually check that white king.
I think we're going to see it now, David. I think the knight will jump back to d4, will jump back to e6 if required, and...
Surely a draw. But no, he plays for the win again. Keeping the game going, Wesley, so.
What is he doing?
This is Wesley 2.0, but it just feels so unnecessary right now.
Feels like you're playing for a loss, if anything.
And remember, if he loses, we will see Armageddon. Is there a chance Mamedov will win this game still?
Wesley still has to go completely crazy for that to happen. But he's made some strange decisions. And, OK, he's getting checked back to the edge with his king. The white pawn is advancing.
He's down to 13 seconds when he had the draw in his hands.
Yeah, now you have to calculate. Like, white's rook could slide across and offer a trade. And I think it's fine for black there, but some risk involved. And, OK, Rauf has gone for this. Suddenly, white has 2 passed pawns. Rooks are off the board. That black knight is a great blockader. Under control still for black. Should be a draw once that black pawn drops off the board. But Wesley, he played it a bit close to the line there. He took some risks, unnecessary ones.
And it's surprising from Wesley So, because he doesn't do that in events where he really needs to win. And so when he doesn't need to win, he's suddenly deciding to take that risk. But you might be right, David. It's day one. He's just saying, let me get into tournament shape. I'm going to win this match, and I have an objectively better position. It's about to be a draw. The knight checks the king. It's going to win this pawn on d7, and then the last pawn is stopped. We see knight and king versus king. You cannot win that. It is a draw, and that means Wesley So moves on.
Wow, it is over. After 4 games, Wesley So wins this matchup. In the quarterfinals, he stays on the winner bracket to face Hikaru Nakamura tomorrow. In the winners' semifinals, Rauf Mamedov is knocked down to the losers bracket and will play Gukash tomorrow in the losers round 1. Feels so harsh to say losers about these fantastic players. But that's double elimination. Winners bracket and losers bracket.
Yeah, you can call it the lower bracket.
Yeah.
It makes you feel better. But no matter what, you lost today.